On a winter day in Vancouver 6 years ago, Nazanin Afshin-Jam received an email. It was an urgent plea from a man helping a teenager on death row in Iran, and she couldn't turn it down. After all, Nazanin herself was born in Iran to a wealthy family, just after the Islamic Revolution, but her parents fled Tehran when Nazanin's father had a run-in with regime enforcers. He was beaten and brutalized and told he would be killed. So the family wound up in Vancouver, where Nazanin was raised and educated, and where she decided to compete in the Miss World pageant. The competition's motto was beauty with a purpose. Nazanin decided her purpose would be to draw attention to human rights. She recorded an album and addressed the issue in this video. And earlier this year, Nazanin married our Minister of National Defense, Peter MacKay. Now let's get back to the email. It was a plea to help an 18-year-old, also named Nazanin, and on death row in Tehran for stabbing a man who was trying to rape her. Nazanin campaigned for the girl's release and formed a group called Stop Child Executions. And after 2 years in prison, young Nazanin was eventually freed. Now that story is in a book that, well, despite the young girl's release, doesn't have the sort of Hollywood ending you'd hope for.
Please welcome to the show, Nazanin Afshin-Jam. How are you? Welcome back. Congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
I mean, this is it's quite a story. I mean, for people who haven't had a chance to read it yet, and just set up the idea of this.
Well, it weaves part of my story with the part of the story of Nazanin Fatihi, was a poor Kurdish girl in Iran who faced a life of abuse and discrimination in her family, and then came to the situation where she was faced with 3 men that tried to attack her and rape her, and she ended up protecting her 15-year-old niece and herself, stabbing one of the men, and he later died. She was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. So the story weaves both of our stories, the campaign, the struggles.
And so the campaign being that somebody emails you one day, and that's how the story starts, like in the book, that you get an email saying, help. I'm sure you get lots of those emails. So what was it about this that had you, and what did you, how did you try to help? How would you even begin this?
Right, well, I do get a lot of those emails, but this one, the subject line read urgent. So that first caught my attention. And the fellow that told me was a complete stranger, and he had read her story and Googled my name to find more about her because we shared the same name, and ended up telling me parts of her story. And the more I did research on her story and learned about the injustices, the more I decided somebody needed to do something about it.
When you were able to get a group of people, parliamentarians in the business community together to try to raise awareness and also raise funds to get this girl out of jail, that is a tricky scenario, because a lot of people who work in certain scenarios, Iran being one of them, will tell you that sometimes the vocal message from the outside community compromises what they're doing inside. How did you manage that?
We had to make certain choices. When I was first campaigning for her, you know, I was contemplating, do I bring her case forward to the U.S. government? At the time, though, Bush was in power, and decided maybe it's not the right time or place. So, you know, it's like a chess game. You have to know where to make the moves of the chess pieces and decide what's going to hurt or help her. And there was a part in the campaign, and you'll read it in the book, where I thought that our pressure had brought her to a situation where she was going to be executed imminently. And, you know, that was a very scary day. I was working with my counterpart, Mina, and, you know, I was crying and saying, oh my gosh, did we cause her file to be sent to Tehran?
See, that's what I'm talking about. Those are the choices that you have to make. And so what happens after that?
Well, after that, there was so much international pressure on the head of judiciary in Iran that she finally got a stay of execution and had the opportunity to have a new trial. And that's where she was exonerated, basically, of the murder charges and released. So thank God, you know, our pressure did actually make a difference. And I've noticed in the cases, subsequent cases of children on death row, that the cases that we did focus on, we did highlight in the media or get diplomatic pressure, those were the ones that received stays of execution or were released in the end. So it always pays to put attention on the causes.
Do you feel like that we in the outside world know what's going on in Iran? We have a real understanding of what's happening there?
I think people have come to become more aware since the 2009 fraudulent presidential elections that took place, and people for the first time realize that there's a large separation from those regime officials that are in power versus the vast majority of the Iranian people who are freedom-loving. They want democracy, they want freedom, they want everything we have here in Canada. And I think with the death of Neda Agha Sultan being shot in the street and just the brutal violence that was displayed on TV, people learned for the first time just how serious the human rights abuses are that people face on a daily basis there. But there's a lot to learn. People still need to learn that, you know, there's still children on death row, women are still being stoned, ethnic and religious minorities are still being persecuted, homosexuals are being imprisoned and executed, so
much of the conversation, too, in the international community revolves around the nuclear program, right? And some of the kind of insane ramblings that Ahmadinejad has as it relates to Israel. But you get the feeling that if they just backed off the nuclear plan, the rest of the international community, government-wise, would go, okay, we're good, we're fine, not fully aware of all the other things that are happening there.
That's the disappointing part. You know, sometimes when I hear Obama speaking, it seems like all he wants is for the regime officials to say, okay, we will stop with our nuclear capabilities, and at that point, they can wipe their hands clean and not think about the rest of the Iranian society and the human rights, the abuses that they face.
Who you're married to is, who anybody's married to is not really usually a part of the conversation, but at the end of your book, it's such a strong statement about needing regime change in Iran. And I read that and I was thinking to myself, okay, as an individual, that's amazing, it's true. But when your partner is the Minister of Defense of a country, that statement carries more in a way, you know, like that is a little bit more complicated. When you wrote it, did you think at all about that?
Not at all. I've never even contemplated
it. He hasn't brought it up yet?
No, he hasn't. But again, the word regime change can have so many different connotations.
By the way, Peter MacKay, for the record, Peter MacKay, that's, you know, who's been in this red chair as well. Yes. Yeah.
Regime change, to some, it would mean military instigation, intervention. Right. But I absolutely abhor war. I don't think that's the solution for Iran. I think there's a lot of different...
Does the Minister of Defense know that you abhor war?
Oh, he does. He is the Minister of Defense. Right. He's not the Minister of War.
Of offense, right?
Yes, he's here to protect our national sovereignty and to help in situations when there's disasters in Haiti or Afghanistan, bringing education to the girls there. There's a lot of good in the role of defense minister. But in this particular case, yes, I am all for supporting the people from within and having this regime crumble, because it's the worst thing that's happened to our country in 30 years.
What's your relationship like with the Iranians in Canada?
Very good. Yeah. I think the younger population, I think they're the ones that are going to ultimately make change in the country, not just the ones in Canada, but throughout Iran. A lot of our parents and grandparents are very ideological, and they stick to a certain political party or platform, but the younger generation don't have those ties, and they really just want the freedom of the nation. So I have hope.
There you go. Go right to the Tale of Two Nazanins. It's great to see you again. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Nazanin Afshin-Jam, everybody. We'll be right back.